For most collectors, the moment their passion first sparked is hard to recall. Most would say it happened by accident, almost as if it were destined back in childhood. Yet if you look closer, there is almost always a first object, the one that sparks the obsession. For Vyacheslav Glushkov, it was a small pouch of old coins, a gift from his grandmother. At first, the images stamped on the metal seemed mysterious, but over time, he realized that every coin carries its own story. Numismatics is regarded as one of the oldest forms of collecting, with its golden age traced by historians to the Renaissance. In the 15th and 16th centuries, European rulers cultivated a deep interest in ancient coins, seeing them as symbols of knowledge and prestige. Even then, the first catalogs and scholarly descriptions of collections began to appear. Today, the largest collections are preserved in the British Museum and the Hermitage, hundreds of thousands of coins through which scholars explore the economy, politics, and art of past civilizations.
Нужно задать вопрос, для чего вы хотите коллекционировать?
You need to ask yourself, what do you want to collect? Is it for the soul, for yourself, or as an investment? Any path you take, in the end, will bring value to you and later to your children and grandchildren. Because no matter the political or economic situation in a country, antiques will always hold their worth for future generations. And with time, as the years pass, they only become rarer.
Для будущих поколений, к чему я вернусь опять, потому что со временем, с годами, его становится меньше.
Scientists say that the search for rare items activates the brain's reward system. Psychologists call this the hunting effect, where the pleasure comes not for possession, but from the process of searching. That's why a collector can spend hours browsing a flea market, buy nothing at all, and still feel happy. And if you ask such a person why they do it, the answer is simple: to preserve history.
Я верю в то, что каждый предмет хранит свою историю.
I believe that every antique object carries its own story. Perhaps some people are more sensitive to this, drawn to the energy of such things, wanting to see it, wanting to believe in it. For me, what matters most is the history behind the item. Take coins, for example. Imagine a coin that is 100 years old. How many hands has it passed through? What was bought with it? And in the end, how did it find its way into an album, into a collection, here in the 21st century? Surely coins hold a certain energy.
Уже в альбоме, в коллекции. Да, наверняка с монетами есть какая-то энергетика.
For Saulia Kobzhanova, it all began with her grandmother's samovar, an object at once ordinary and significant. Objects like these connect generations more deeply than any archive. Then came trays, cups, another samovar, and little by little the homely arrangement grew into a collection that filled every floor of a large house.
Ну, я чувствую такие вещи. Ну, честно говоря, то, чего не хотела.
I can feel these things. Honestly, I never bought what I didn't want. I always chose items from good homes. In Europe, always from respectable households, never from a bankrupt estates. I never purchased objects that were seized for debts or offered under such circumstances. That is simply not for me. For me, an item is acceptable if, for example, the new owner of a European castle decided to convert it into a hotel and sell the furniture. That used to happen quite often some years ago, and in that case, yes. But if it comes with a bad history from a ruined estate, then no.
Вот тогда, пожалуйста. А если это что-то такое, с какой-то такой плохой историей, там что-то за долги, с разорившимся...
As I've said before, the same applies to weapons. I don't collect them because they were once used for their intended purpose. Even though they're beautiful, often true works of art, they're not for me. What matters to me is the energy of an object. It should bring joy, serve, and function. I don't like broken things. Everything I acquire is its in original state. I don't restore anything. I'm able to show them as they are and tell people their stories. I have something to share, and I believe that is my mission. I have preserved them.
Я в состоянии их показать и людям о них рассказать. Мне есть что показать. То есть, я считаю, это и есть миссия моя. Я же их сохранила.
It is interesting that English samovars differed in design from the Soviet ones. Instead of coal, they used a metal heating element, a weight placed inside the body. This is confirmed by museum collections in Britain and reflects domestic culture. The reason is simple. The English avoided smoke indoors and sought to protect their textiles.
И вот здесь я хотела обратить ваше внимание, как бы в самоварах, как и в машинах, есть самовары,
I
которые...
wanted to draw your attention to the fact that, as just with cars, there are samovars that were made exclusively for the royal family.
Часть самоваров,
Some of the samovars presented here were very expensive and usually found their way into the noble households.
которые создавались только для аристократии, поскольку были очень
But
дороги.
there were also samovars made only for the aristocracy because of their high cost. One distinguished manufacturer was the Hennenberg Brothers Company. Here you can see one of their samovars. Notice the monogram, proof that it belonged to an aristocratic family who marked it with their crest.
Проставил свой вензель. Видите, какие у него ножки? Видели?
Look at the legs shaped like a lion's paws and the rich decoration of branches and garlands, symbols of power and luxury.
Различными ветвями, гирляндами, то есть свидетельствующими, опять же таки, о власти, о роскоши. Такой вот.
If I may put it this way, the Hennenberg samovar is the Rolls-Royce among samovars.
То вот этот самовар Хеннинберг – это среди, скажем так, самоваров.
With every object that enters the home, it is not just a thing that arrives. It brings with it the technology of its time, the aesthetics of its era, and the way people once lived. And suddenly, the collector realizes that he has become a guardian. Yet the path of a guardian is rarely simple. In the world of antiques, forgeries are common. The fewer originals remain, the more copies appear. Vyacheslav recalls buying 18th century silver coins, convinced of their authenticity, only to later discover discrepancies in weight and minting details. According to the International Council of Museums, the illegal trade in cultural property and counterfeits is one of the largest shadow markets in the world, and a copy may be made from the very same material as the original.
Для чего их подделывать?
Why are they forged? By the price of the metal, they may be identical, but there is also cultural value, collectible value, and that far exceeds the worth of rare coins with small mintages, sometimes by many times over. That is why you can find both silver and gold pieces made of pure metal, yet there are still copies. And as such, they hold no interest for collectors. There are objects that may cost little, yet mean more than any rarity. For Vyacheslav, it was a badge inscribed Moscow to Leningrad, a reminder of a childhood trip. Its value is not about the metal or the edition size, but in memory. Collectors call this emotional worth, and it often outweighs market price. That is why an old teacup can matter more than a museum piece if it carries a family story. Formally, an antique is usually defined as an item over 100 years old. This definition is used, for example, in customs regulations of the European Union and the United States. Anything younger is generally referred to as vintage.
Поэтому на сегодняшний день, знаете, есть такой пример. Это...
Take, for instance, the helmets worn by soldiers of the Roman Empire. Back then, they were worth almost nothing. Today, they command enormous sums as historical artifacts. So with each passing year, any everyday object can, after a century, become an antique.
Любой предмет в нашем обиходе может перерасти через 100 лет уже в антиквариат.
The story of great collections often follows a familiar path. It begins with passion, continues through years of patient dedication, and culminates in a gift to society. Such was the journey of American industrialist Charles Freer, who donated his collection to the Smithsonian Institution, thereby founding an entire museum. A parallel story unfolded in Kazakhstan, where Naum Schaffer built a record collection of some 27,000 items gathered from around the world over decades, which upon his passing was bequeathed to the state. But the most touching part is how it all began. The foundation of the collection was just 30 records given to his parents as a wedding gift. As a boy, he listened to them almost as if they were living beings. Later, as an adult, he carried this childhood bond through deportation, poverty, and a scientific career, continuing until the end of his life to collect the sounds of the world, from operas to the noises of nature. Here is how Naum Schaffer himself described it in one of the interviews preserved in our archive. These records spanned a wide range of genres. There was serious classical music, works by Glinka, Rimsky-Korsakov, Verdi, and other great composers, alongside beautiful examples of dance music, folk music, and more. So when I grew up, I didn't divide music the way some aesthetes do. You see, this is a light genre, that is a serious genre, and so on. I realized that all genres have value as long as it is good music. Phonophilia, the collection of audio recordings, is recognized as a distinct field of collecting alongside numismatics and philately. There are clubs, catalogs, scholarly studies, and even museums dedicated to it. The gramophone record itself stands as one of the greatest technological marvels. Before its invention, sound was considered fleeting. It arose and disappeared. Thomas Edison's phonograph, created in 1877, made it possible not only to capture sound physically, but also to reproduce it. Later, disc technology brought music to the masses, making it widely accessible. That is why old records today hold immense cultural value. They preserve the voices of eras that cannot be recreated in any other way. Naum Schaffer always insisted that an original cannot be replaced by a digital copy, and indeed, archival research shows that analog recordings, when properly stored, can last more than 100 years without significant loss of quality. This record is 86 years old. Can you imagine a modern disc sounding the same after all that time? It sounds today exactly as it did then. That is why I always stress this point. Some people say, digitize everything and discard the records. But the first rule of any museum is to preserve the original. A collector's home rarely resembles ordinary living space. It feels like a place where eras coexist. In Saule's house, antiques fill every corner. Some of ours stand beside 19th century European doll carriages. Castle furniture sits alongside Kazakh hand-woven carpets. And old clocks measure time next to a piano from the previous century. And in this, there is no chaos, only the logic of cultural dialogue.
Видите,
You see, this chair comes from the throne room, the very hall where the king and queen once sat. It's authentic castle furniture placed against the backdrop of a 19th century painting depicting the monarchs themselves. The pieces form a pair perfectly balanced. It's ideal harmony, almost a kind of feng shui.
Kazakh carpets, which Saulia loves, have a very special kind of value. They weren't made to be sold, but to mark important moments: weddings, the birth of a child, anniversaries. Ethnographers say that their patterns often conveyed wishes for prosperity, fertility, and protection. Each carpet became like a family record written into its design. Living among such pieces makes a person a bridge between generations.
I am deeply proud of my carpet collection. I truly love Kazakh carpets. They are a unique creation of the hand, and I don't see them as mere craftwork. To me, they are genuine works of art. What makes them especially remarkable is that Kazakh carpets were never produced for sale. Each one was created with meaning and purpose.
Most people find it hard to understand collectors. They may cut back on clothes or postpone everyday purchases, yet think nothing of spending freely on a rare find. Research in behavioral economics shows that for collectors, an object's value is shaped less by its market price than by how much it is desired and how rare it is. That is why someone can spend years searching for a single porcelain figurine and feel pure joy when they finally discover it.
За ценой не постоим, потому что коллекционер...
When it comes to price, collectors don't hesitate, because a collector is like a hunter. I have met people who walk around in patched trousers and worn jackets, yet own incredibly rich collections of coins or porcelain. They are ready to give up everything just to obtain the one item they desire for their collection, regardless of food or clothing. That's the kind of passion collectors carry inside.
Ни на что, ни на еду, ни на одежду. Вот такие вот коллекционеры внутри.
But over time, another truth becomes clear. Antiques are not only about passion, but also about responsibility. Objects disappear. They break, burn in fires, end up in landfills, or vanish along with family memory. Historians of material culture confirm that most everyday items of the past were lost precisely because they were considered unnecessary. In this sense, the collector performs a museum function, saving what might otherwise be gone. And sometimes, private collections become the foundation of major museums, from the Louvre to the Metropolitan Museum, with their world-class holdings. Perhaps that is why people who collect old things have a special view of time. They grasp a simple truth: any object around us may one day become a historical treasure.
Коллекционирование как инвестиции, как хобби.
Collecting can be an investment, or simply a hobby, something I believe everyone should have, because any passion gives a kind of stimulus. Many people are drawn to it, so I wish that everyone might have at least one object that brings them aesthetic pleasure and keeps alive the memory of their loved ones.
Эстетическое удовольствие, память о своих близких, родных.
Collecting has long ceased to be the eccentricity of loners. Today it is a cultural institution preserving the material evidence of eras. Yet every collector has a personal reason. For Naum Schaffer, it was the music of childhood. For Vyacheslav Glushkov, his grandmother's coins. For Saulia Kobzhanova, the family samovar. Great collections always begin with a small love.